correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience. Welcome back to Me and Steve. What's up, Gamer Nation? Steve back in the house, along with Steve.
Hey!
And we have a guest this week, but before we get to that, I want to take a quick minute to talk to you about our D20 Network Podcast of the Week, which this week is going to be the Genesis Archive, because that's actually what we're going to more or less spend most of the episode talking about in one form or another. But this is... it's a Genesis actual play podcast where a whole bunch of friends get together to play games. And, well, you can find it at anchor.fm/the Genesis Archives. And it is, let's call it a modern urban fantasy set in Las Vegas. But that's probably, I'll say that's selling it a little bit short. And to further explain that, I'd like to introduce our guest, Jonathan, who is also the GM for this game and also has published the setting on the Genesis Foundry under the title The Unseen World. So, Jonathan, welcome to Me and Steve.
Thanks for having me.
So, I guess in very short, yes, you know, The Unseen World is modern urban fantasy, but it's more. Would you like to take off? Because, I mean, I've listened to some of it. I'm a bit behind, but yeah, it's not what you think of when you think typical urban fantasy.
I'm curious what you think of when you think of typical urban fantasy.
Well, to me, initially, I think somewhat kind of World of Darkness, but also, you know, kind of Buffy-ish, that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. So I get a lot of inspiration from some of the like classic urban fantasy stuff like Buffy, Supernatural, the Dresden Files is a big one. But a lot of my influence for The Unseen World also comes from just my love of folklore and mythology. And one thing that I've always been a bit disappointed in, like, I love urban fantasy. It's one of my favorite genres. But one of the things I've been just a little disappointed in the genre with, as I've explored more and more of it, is that it falls into a lot of these modern cliches about supernatural creatures a lot of the time and ignores a lot of the really interesting folklore that is out there. And so when I created The Unseen World, I really wanted to delve into the folkloric aspect that is possible with urban fantasy. And so The Unseen World is kind of a it's kind of a setting where basically every mythology and folklore is true. They all, to one extent or another, they all exist in this world together. And along with that are these different like secret societies and organizations of supernatural origin that kind of move things behind the scenes. And there is this whole unseen world of people living lives with magic and, in a lot of cases, murder and mayhem that the regular world doesn't see, largely because most people don't want to see. It's an idea that I've kind of taken from things like the Dresden Files, where people don't know magic is real because they don't want to believe it's real. They'd rather believe that they understand the world than accept the fact that, like, a monster could step out of the shadows any minute and swallow you up and you'd never be seen again.
Yeah, that's cool. That was the impression I had kind of gotten listening to the show, is that you really did go into, to put it in gamer terms, you went past the D&D mythology to a lot of the, you know, the original folklore and, you know, even some of, even going back, you know, like Greek mythology and stuff to really kind of dig into more of the background of what the creatures and species or races or whatever you want to call them that you're using.
Yeah, I've just it's funny. When I was a little kid, at a school, like an elementary school, at a scholastic book fair. I got this book called Vampires, Werewolves, and Zombies. And it's just this book that had a collection of like each page was a different monster from the folklore of different countries around the world. And that book fascinated me so much as a kid that it just kind of like I even before that I'd like fantasy in general. Like I read The Hobbit when I was 8, but that book specifically got me really fascinated with real world folklore, myth, and legend, and really got me started on a love for just diving into the original stories of different cultures from around the world.
That's really cool. And so I take it that at some point a love of gaming came along, and then you melded the two. And
Yeah, it's funny with gaming. So I had wanted to try D&D and other tabletop RPGs for years, but I just never had anyone to play with until about 4 years ago when I finally like found people who would play with me. And I started with Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars RPG and started with like the like pre-made adventures that they have and stuff. And then once I like figured out like that I could find people, then I just never stopped. And every friend I've made since then, I've kind of roped them into the hobby. And when Genesis was brand new, I just love when they first announced Genesis, I was enamored with the idea of a setting that like you could build anything in. And so when Genesis was brand new first released, I like just immediately started churning out like my own little settings that I posted on like the Genesis forums. And one of the very first ones was the what was then called the Hidden World, which was kind of the very proto version of the Unseen World.
well, that's really cool. I'm going to guess, yeah. So you haven't really been gaming all that long at this point, then, because FFG Star Wars didn't come out until what was it, 2012?
Yeah, no, I am comparatively new to gaming. Yeah, it's only been about 4 years since I first started.
Wow.
Yeah, but I started out as a GM from the get-go, actually, because I found out that if I wanted to find people to play with me, I needed to set it up and be the one in charge because I couldn't find an already existing game master. So I've been a game master for pretty much like as long as I've been playing.
Well, I don't think that's an uncommon thing amongst those of us into, shall we say, the not massively popular games. 'Cause I know that's how I got my start GMing, was I wanted to play a game that no one else wanted to run.
Yep.
So I ran it.
Yeah, most people just know D&D.
So, I mean, I don't even know where to start, but like I'm guessing at that point you had spent a bunch of time reading, assorted, be it folklore, call it folklore history books, whatever. And then at some point the idea came to, well, let's put it all together and make it a game. Like, how did you approach that other than just, well, I like this and I like this and I like this, so let's put it all together? Or was there more to it than that? Or
So it started with the group that I play with, that like the cast of the Genesis archives. We had kind of had a like cyclical system that we started out with when we came together, where basically we were all at college together. And so what I did is I would do a different campaign each semester, and each semester was a different setting. Like we would try something new every semester. And so like the very first semester we did Star Wars. Then our second semester was a Lord of the Rings campaign. And then the one after that was like a World of Warcraft themed campaign. And then I don't remember. Oh, and then the superhero campaign after that. And then after the superhero campaign, I think yes, somewhere in there between, we did a superhero campaign, we went back to Warcraft, and then we did Unseen World Season 1. And like originally we recorded all of our seasons like just for fun originally, and then Caitlin came to me. Caitlin is our like main editor and person who does all of the like computer work, all the stuff that makes it so we can have an actual podcast. And she came to me and was like, "Hey, like we could make a podcast out of this." And so when we went into Unseen World season 1, which at that point we weren't even sure if there was going to be a season 2, so it was just our Unseen World campaign. So we set it up like it would be a podcast. And originally we were just going to like keep the cyclical thing, changing it up every time. But the Unseen World just like sparked something in my brain when I was designing it, building it up from the original very bare bones like hidden world variant that I started with. That like as I built it up, it just sparked something in my brain, and like I have ADHD, so hyper focus is a thing that happens. I get hyper focus on things, and I hyper focused on the Unseen World more than I've hyper focused on pretty much anything, and just like went wild with it and built it into this thing that became much more massive than I initially expected.
Well, that's cool though. It's like a fun origin to it.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to ask a question, and part of it is why Vegas? I mean, was it simply the fact that you can get away with darn near anything in Vegas? Like I've often said that I think Vegas was like the perfect place for them to set the original CSI series because you can just have anything pop up because it's Vegas.
Yeah, that's kind of true. There's a mix of reasons. One big one, because initially I did have like a couple things that I thought about picking. Like New Orleans was on like the docket for like a bit as a possibility, because New Orleans very much has a very mystical side to it. Even without like bringing in actual like fairies and demons and whatnot. But I realized that I personally I couldn't feel like I was being genuine running a game set in New Orleans, for example, because I don't know New Orleans. Vegas is my hometown. I've lived in Vegas since I was 8 years old, and I know this town better than I know any other. And so it just the feel of Vegas was perfect for the Unseen World, and I knew Vegas, and so it was kind of just like a perfect concurrence of coincidences that came together to result in us setting the campaign in Vegas.
Cool. So yeah, that's something that I've heard from a lot of people with their world building process is that they really did kind of they just went with, so to speak, what was familiar and kept it really close to that. And so that if nothing else, it provides them a point of reference where they don't have to think hard about, say, the geography or like you said, the city, that's where you grew up. So that part of it is just stored in your regular brain. You don't have to store a whole bunch of other made up information in your brain, so to speak.
Yeah, and I wanted the Unseen World to feel like obviously it's fake, like it's wizards and fairies and monsters and stuff, but I wanted it to like have a bit of authenticity to it so you could almost believe it's real. And like I couldn't get that authenticity from any other city because I don't know the people or the neighborhoods and the like vibe of other cities like enough to really give it that authenticity anywhere else.
Okay. Now, the other thing I wanted to ask, because I've kind of struggled a little bit, and maybe it's just because I listen to podcasts while I'm working, and so I may occasionally miss a minute here or two, you know what I mean? But I'm assuming in the material you've published thus far on the Foundry that at least most of like your archetypes that your players are using in season one are there. But like what type of archetypes, or in most games they call them classes, and species or race or whatever you want to call them, what did you build for the Unseen World?
So for archetypes and careers, so the archetypes I put in, so there are like several human variants, like the ones that are already in the base game, like you've got like the laborer and the intellectual and whatnot. So to give you a variety of options if you wanted to play human. But then there are all of the other archetypes are basically human plus. There's no, like, you can't really play an entirely different species in the Unseen World because every, like, humans are unique in that of all of the different entities that exist, humans have free will. Like a fairy cannot lie. They cannot. It is impossible for them to do so. They do not have the ability to choose otherwise. And similarly, like a demon cannot choose to be a good person. Demons are naturally evil. And like, so all of these supernatural entities, they lack what humans have. But you can have situations where humans and like supernatural entities end up having children together, and you have people that are part human and part something else. So you can have someone who is like half human and half demon, or half human and half fairy. And those are both kind of broad classifications. There's different types of demons, different types of fairies and whatnot, and different types of other magical entities that can have children with humans. Like there's the classic like Zeus situation where a god and a human have kids and results in a demigod. But basically, so the archetypes are humans and various types of half human, half something else.
Aha. That explains a few things. Yeah, because listening to the show, it's like you've got the PCs are, you've got, I guess, yeah, are they all demi-humans, I guess then would be the appropriate term?
Some of them are. The kind of catch-all term that I use is scion, for like half human, half supernatural.
Hmm.
But you've got without spoiling stuff, like Caden and Rianne are both human. They do not have any like fairy blood or demon blood or any of that. Though Caden has his own situation going on.
Now, trying to
But
remember which one is the one with the sensory issues.
that is, yeah, Caden is our cowboy hunter character, who has a bit of a disability with his sensory problems.
Which, by the way, I think that's a really unique thing that I don't know if that was player's idea or yours or some.
That was his idea. It was, yeah, Aaron, or Baron as we call him, because we used to have another Aaron in the group. Baron he's excellent with his character design. Every single one of the PCs he's made in our various campaigns have been excellent, and Caden is one of his best. And yeah, I work with everyone when they're making their characters to help integrate them into the overall campaign better, to kind of tie their backstories into the events of the campaign. But like all of the stuff with his characterization and his disability and everything were all his idea.
That's really cool. And yeah, I don't want to spoil too much, if people haven't gone and listened to the show because, like I find it, like I said, initially my gut, well, oh, it's urban fantasy, and I'm kind of like you said, there's so much of it is just so cliched. It's kind of like I listen, I'm like, okay, this is all right, but then I got distracted and whatever, and then I came back to it and I started listening to more episodes, and it's like, oh wait, no, this is definitely much more than your typical, just surface level Disney or D&D version of all this lore. This is diving into some of the old folklore tales and some of that, and really, playing off that.
One of my favorite examples of that in the Unseen World is what I call the Court of Blood, which is the like worldwide vampire faction, but it's comprised of a bunch of different types of vampires from across the world that have all kind of banded together to become this greater faction, because there's more to vampires than just your stereotypical like Dracula, Buffy, D&D, Twilight vampires. Like so many countries around the world have their own unique type of vampire. So it's fun to kind of explore some of those different variants.
Well, that's cool because it popped into my head here. Have you like studied some of these mythologies more in depth, other than just, what do you want to say, intensely recreationally for the gaming purposes? Like, is this something you took some classes in at school or?
I have taken a bit. I haven't taken like a bunch of classes, because most of my classes have had to be focused on like requireds and stuff. But yeah, a lot of basically all of my like elective classes I've done in college are either creative writing courses or stuff focused on like other religions and mythologies and stuff.
That's cool. So, and Steve, by the way, feel free to chime in here at any point. I know I'll just talk his poor ear off if you don't. So,
Yeah, I know I can also ramble.
No, you're pretty much ahead of me. You're asking the questions that
jump in and ask something. So, like, do you pretty much then have you pretty much come to your players with the world, or at least initially was there, like a big kind of like session zero type thing, and you went, oh, you want to do this, so okay, well, and then that shot you off down a trail, or
Yeah, so the overall world was entirely my creation, but like how I determined how things would go in the campaign was very much based on everyone else at the table. Like I don't even remember entirely anymore what season 1 was originally going to be, but I had a couple of different ideas, and then I saw that a lot, a lot of the people had ideas for their characters that were all tied into the same overall theme. They all had this isn't too big of a spoiler. They all had connections to the Fae, and so that like seeing how many of them had that similar connection, I was like, all right, well, I guess we're starting off with a very Fae-centric story as kind of the overarching story of season 1. And so that's kind of how that came about. And then season 2, and actually, then each of the seasons afterward have been very much focused on kind of delving into a particular PC's like background and like kind of their side of the world and stuff. Like season 2 is very tied into Voltaire and Voltaire's backstory and his whole deal.
yeah, I like Voltaire. Voltaire amuses me.
Yes, Voltaire is very fun. I also have fun as Joan, kind of poking at Voltaire.
That was something I did want to ask you about because the party NPC or GMPC or whatever a lot of people want to call them is something that gets debated a fair amount, in the gaming community. And I noticed that you have Joan in there as basically a whatever you want to call that type of character who's constantly with the party. How did that come about? Was it kind of a plot safety device, or was it something you intended all along, or
That's something that I've just always done in all of my campaigns. I always have a like kind of a PC of my own that I put in there, and I have them there largely to kind of help build everyone's individual stories, because I can have things like Voltaire is a bit of a narcissist, and so Joan can act as a foil for Voltaire by kind of poking at him and kind of pointing out his flaws to him, which kind of helps develop his character somewhat. And she has a connection to Caden that really fleshes out his character that I can't go into a lot because there's some heavy spoilers involved with that. And I've just found that having someone with the party really helps to kind of help play off everyone's different stories and develop everyone's characters and kind of create the best narrative.
that's fair.
That works with me. I don't think it would work with everyone. Everyone has their own style. And I do know that a lot of times people use like there's a reason why there's a stigma attached to the GMPC, because a lot of people do misuse it where they try to make the GMPC like the main character of the story, or where they like try to make them like the center of everything. But before I like started playing RPGs, I was a writer, and I'm used to not having I'm used to playing with different characters and none of them being The like all right, brain collect thoughts.
You having like multiple main characters or not a central main character, something like that.
Yeah, and like so the I think the issue that comes with GMPCs a lot is that like it's a GM thinking like, "Oh, I'm not playing unless I have a person in the group and I want to play." Whereas I kind of come at it from a perspective of like, how do I create the best narrative for everyone?
Mhm.
And focusing on creating the best story rather than like like I want like it's my turn to play.
Yeah, yeah, no, and like the through the I'm what 3 or 4 arcs into campaign 1 and I mean, to me listening to it, in a lot of ways easy to forget that your character is there along other than, occasionally she does something that kind of, and I don't know if this is again something you occasionally do as a plot device where, oh yeah, they're in a little over their head, and not that she like steals the show in any way, but she has this little thing that she can do that makes the situation closer to manageable for the rest of the crew, which I think is a neat way to handle things. In that, what do you want to say? Like I'm specifically thinking of the card game situation in the end of, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd arc?
Yes, the poker game.
Yes. And like I said, it was kinda like you used your character to facilitate the rest of the characters being able to solve the problem. It wasn't, "Oh, look, here's my character, and they're gonna fix it." It was more like your character did a thing that let everyone else fix it.
Yeah, that's a lot of Joan especially is kind of her thing because she's a spellcaster with who focuses largely on like support type spells. She does shields and illusions and stuff. And I just think it's fun to be able to have someone who kind of helps bring out everyone else's skills.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I think that's cool. Now, the other thing that I know, and I know you've published a little supplement on this, that you handled a lot differently than most other games, is the issue of monies. Is that part of the Unseen World book, or is that just in the little standalone thing that you did in addition to that?
Yeah, it is also in the Unseen World book. I created I created like the wealth book specifically, separate from the Unseen World book because I figured that the wealth rule that I developed would work for a lot of settings beyond just the Unseen World. And I wanted to kind of throw that out there for anyone who wanted to use it, even if they didn't want to spend like the full $10 to get the Unseen World with everything that comes with it. So I kind of just wanted to make that available to anyone who wanted it, which is why I made that separate for like a buck. But yeah, the wealth rule I came up with when I was doing the Unseen World because in the modern world, we don't really acquire money the same way like fantasy adventurers do. We don't raid dungeons and stuff. Like typically, you have a day job. You might like be like Joan and be a bartender, or you might like be a cashier, or in some cases, you might be fortunate enough to be rich. You might be like you might own a tech company or et cetera, et cetera. And so I created the wealth rule to make a way of measuring wealth that better aligned with how like more modern systems work.
Cool. Yeah, yeah. No, it seemed to me like, although having heard your background a little bit, maybe not so much, that it maybe was somewhat inspired by the credit rating system that Call of Cthulhu uses, or at least some older versions of Call of Cthulhu.
I have only tried Call of Cthulhu once, and that was actually after I had done some Unseen World bit stuff already. So it was not based on Call of Cthulhu. It was actually based on the Dresden Files RPG has a wealth skill as one of the skills you can get, though only loosely based. it was mostly just the general idea of a skill for wealth rather than a set wealth, like a set amount of gold or whatever.
Hmm.
Just basically, I saw in the Dresden Files RPG that was a thing, and it was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. I should try that.
Yeah, I know Steve, who unfortunately had to step out. He actually has a copy of that that we've been meaning to play at some point, but haven't got there yet. But yeah, no, the way I understand it from having heard you talk about it on the podcast and a little bit around the internet, your wealth system effectively works more or less just like the Genesis skill system, doesn't it?
Yep. Yeah, with like different like it's basically just like your wealth is determined by how many ranks in the wealth skill you have, and your presence stat, though there are or character your presence characteristic, though there are different talents you can get to switch it around to better represent how you acquired that money, like cunning for like there's like underworld dealings, I think is one of the talents where it changes it to cunning to represent like you acquired your money through some underhanded means. And smart investments, a talent that switches it over to intellect to represent like you're a tech mogul or something. Like you got your money through being real smart with your money. And then like there's a unique chart for like different advantages and threats and despairs and whatnot for it. But yeah, but the base is just like how many ranks you have is how wealthy you are.
That's really cool. I like that. And the other thing that it does is just eliminates another step of the bookkeeping of playing the game, which, look, I'm sure there are people out there who enjoy that, but if I'd have wanted to be an accountant, I would have gone to school for that.
Right? I feel very much the same way. That's also one of the reasons why I like just Genesis in general is there's less math than other systems. Uh,
Yeah, well, see, I have a weird thing where like I'm competent with math, right?
mhm,
Algebra for me was kind of fun, geometry, that kind of stuff. Calculus, on the other hand, makes
mhm.
absolutely no sense in this world to me.
Yeah, I can algebra, geometry, that's fine, but calculus, please keep it away.
Yeah, well, like, I still remember the scenario that sticks in my head was this thing about graphing the equation when your variable tends toward positive or negative infinity, and you ended up with the limit being positive, negative infinity, and I went, "Well, that's what we knew when we started out. Why did we just spend half an hour to figure it out?"
That's great.
But yeah, no, I like that, and I think it's really cool that, and also the way you added the talents or whatever to reflect a different source, so to speak. I think that's really neat. That's something I may just start using that in most of my games in some form or other, just because I don't want to be bothered with the bookkeeping and like you said,
Yeah,
the traditional system works great in fantasy games or more maybe adventure-based games, but
yeah. If you're in a modernish setting, then it doesn't work quite as well.
yeah, yeah, and like I said, my one of the first games I was ever in a campaign of was actually 5th edition Call of Cthulhu back in the mid-90s, so, showing my age a little bit, but, they use a credit rating system, which, as I recall, works fairly similar, where basically, "Oh, your credit rating's this? Yeah, you can just go get the thing."
Make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, because you know what? Yeah, and then you have the deal where, okay, well, you need to go get this thing. Now, do we just hand wave that you went and bought it, or does somebody wanna play out, well, we go buy a helicopter? And it can be fun depending on your group. Some groups really get into all that shopping type stuff.
Mhm.
Other groups don't want to.
Yep. And it also makes it so you actually can like role play being a poor character versus being a rich character. Like if you're going by like the standard system, then if you try to role play a rich character, then you're kind of I guess lying or something. Like you'd have to like somehow coerce your GM into giving you more gold than the rest of the party. Or like if you wanted to start poor and stay poor, you'd have to when everyone else is like getting gold from the adventure, you'd have to be like, "No, I don't want it."
Yeah.
Whereas with this, you can if you want to play as a rich character, you just invest more experience points into starting out with a higher wealth skill.
Well, and I think too, what you've done kind of allows for you to play with that mentality of I'm rich, I can just get it.
Hmm.
And I mean, look, I'm by no means extremely affluent. I have a decent job, I have whatever, but okay, I mean, like the vehicle I drive to work every day is 17 years old. You know what I mean? Like I can't just go buy something, significant because I want it. And I think, that mentality is different, and the way that you built this system allows you to play that as part of your character without looking and going, okay, I have this much gold.
Yep. Yeah, you can have that be part of how your character is built, and I like that. And it's fun because you get to show the wealth disparity between characters with the role play because that happens that's one of the kind of ongoing bits between Joan and Voltaire is that Voltaire is super rich and Joan is not. Joan is a bartender. She's poor. And so the two of them, like, so Voltaire will be like, "Oh yes, we'll just do this easily," and Joan's like, "Not everyone is rich, dude."
Yeah, let me call my driver.
And yeah, like when they're deciding like how to go someplace, like Joan looks at her like beat up old car and's like, "All right, I'm riding with Eliana in her freaking Tesla or whatever."
Yeah. Well, see, I envision Caden driving like an '84 Chevy C10. I don't know why. It's just what sticks in my head.
Like that.
Like or that era, like F-150 or whatever. But yeah, like you said, I think your system really allows that to be an element of role play, not just a number on the character sheet. And I think that's really cool. And I think it too, being as you're playing in Vegas, which I mean, the only thing I know Vegas from is the various TV shows I've seen there. But you've clearly got the strip and the casino and all the celebrity. But then you've got some of the stuff that you see, and I know they're still making money because they're on TV or whatever, but like some of the stuff you see on like the counting cars or the Vegas rat rods, that there is a whole other, what do you want to call it, almost normal people side to Vegas in addition to all the high rollers, and it's not that far apart. At least that's
Yeah.
my
Oh yeah,
impression.
'cause we've got like the valley has a population of like 2.7 million people. Like there's a lot more here than just the strip, and it's really easy for people to forget that when they don't live here.
Yeah, yeah, but I think like your system allows that to be reflected, and I think that's awesome.
I do love that.
Okay, we've talked a little bit about this and a little bit about that and rambled as we do. What else have you done with this that you're really proud of and you'd like to let people know about?
Ooh.
Or is there something that your players rave about that you don't understand why they do, but they constantly do?
So there's a few things that I really love about what I've made, but first I want to kind of focus on what I love about what everyone else has made. Like all of the people who play in this campaign are excellent with their like character creation, in figuring out like connections between each other's characters, in like their interactions and their role playing during the game. Like they just are absolutely fantastic. Like I've already talked a bit about Baron making Caden, but Caitlin with Eliana, she always has like the most unique ideas for characters, and she also gets into characters more than anyone I've ever met. I will wake up at like well, I'll wake up at a like at my usual time. I sleep like the dead. Nothing will wake me up before it's time for me to wake up. But when I wake up, I will often find like 20 plus messages from Caitlin that she sent at like 3 a.m. about her character or like someone else's character, and she'll just like have this big rambling thing talking about all of this stuff, getting really excited. And it's one of my favorite things to wake up to because it's just, I love seeing that excitement and energy for this thing that we're making. And like, it's absolutely wonderful.
That's cool. Yeah, I haven't gotten as good of a handle on Eliana yet, but it's she also seems to be in a lot of ways kind of like the hub to the wheel that is the party. if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good way of saying it.
Like early on, she's the one who got all the phone numbers, so there's the group text thing going and whatever.
Yeah, Eliana is a really deep, like multifaceted character, and she's a bit of a slow burn in like what you find out about her because she has like secrets layered on secrets. And the longer you listen, the more you find out about her. And every time you find out something new about her, there's something beneath that to find out too. And like she's such a complex character that there's always so much to work with there.
Mhm. Okay, now, hopefully I don't sidetrack the previous thing I asked you, but you mentioned this earlier, and to be completely honest, most podcasts, yeah, we do record a little bit ahead of what we put out on the air, but it sounds like you guys have a lot of stuff recorded well in advance of what you're releasing. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think the day we're recording this, like the third or the fourth episode of season 2 dropped, and from hearing you talk, you're well past that in your playing, so to speak, correct?
Yeah, well, yeah, so we are actually currently playing through season 3 and we've almost finished season 3 of the Unseen World. And then we do have like entire other like campaigns that we kind of have set aside for releasing at a later date.
Oh, wow.
That kind of we're actually planning on leaving that to the listeners as to like which campaigns are going to release. We're like going to kind of give them a bit of like several different campaigns and then let them pick which of them we like post the whole campaign onto the air. The Unseen World is kind of going to be like the main campaign for the show, but
Mhm.
there will be like things where we'll have like off seasons where we'll do a different campaign because each of our other campaigns has been about as long or slightly longer than one season of the Unseen World,
Mhm.
with the Unseen World being the only thing that really goes for a bunch of seasons.
Ah, okay. Oh, that's cool. I can't imagine, like, I know for me, because I do art editing and stuff, if I have too much stuff sitting unedited, it starts to make me twitch. I can't imagine what Caitlin goes through.
Yeah, Caitlin is freaking she's the only reason why we have an actual podcast instead of just a bunch of people playing a game. She's been getting other people like we've been she's gotten the rest of us to slowly start learning how to edit and stuff to kind of take some of the weight off her. Like Xander, who plays Voltaire, edits a bit now. Baron edits a bit. Ben, who is like he's played in some of our other campaigns, but he doesn't play in the Unseen World. He also helps a bit with the editing now. But yeah, Caitlin's still very much the main person there.
Ah, that's so let me ask you this, just because I mean it's still topical. Listening to what I have thus far of season 1, that was clearly recorded in person, so I'm going to guess that was clearly all pre-pandemic. How much of a challenge did that raise to you guys, or did you guys transition to playing online in some form or another relatively easily?
That was pretty easy. We had already had some of our campaigns at a mix of in person and online.
Mhm.
Because we had like some of us had different tracks at school. So like what other people had as their like in school semester, other people had as their off semester.
Okay.
And so like we had some things where we had like most of the people in the room, but we had one or two people who were video chatting in. And so we'd already done that a bit, and so it wasn't too hard because we'd already figured out how to get video chat to work for our games. So it wasn't too difficult to switch into video chatting for everyone.
Mhm. Now that's like I said, that and I know that may be a little more behind the scenes than a lot of listeners care about, but it I know for me, running games online feels completely different than running them in person, because even with video conferencing and all the wonderful stuff that we have now, you still can't feel the energy at the table the same way.
Yeah, it's definitely different. One thing that I really miss doing, that I used to do, that I did with all of our in-person stuff, is I like, you know how a lot of people use like miniatures for
Mhm.
their games? I have been an avid Lego fan since I was a tiny tot. Um, and I have a decent sized Lego collection that I've gathered over the couple decades of my life. And so I make everyone's character in Lego minifigures.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so and each campaign before the pandemic, I would also make different minifigures and stuff for the enemies we would face, and
Mhm.
I would set up the battles using the minifigures. We had one campaign where we were it was a seafaring campaign. We were on a ship going from like island to island, and I have three different Lego ships, and I had our ship in Lego. And when we had when we had sea battles, I would bring out the other Lego ship and like have like we'd have the sea like the battles across the boats. One time I tear like I also have like Lego monsters and stuff. So there was one time when I brought out a Lego Kraken where we were just kind of sailing around art role playing, and then I reach out from under the table and I bring out this Lego Kraken and everyone starts freaking out.
That's cool. I
Yeah,
like that.
that's the sort of thing I miss being able to do, is being able to reach it down under the table and pull out a giant Lego monster that they weren't expecting.
But see, like, I think that speaks to just the wonderfulness that RPGs are, that, like you said, you can incorporate your love of Legos into it.
Yeah, it's great.
So you said you've almost got season 3 of the Unseen World recorded, plus you've got other stuff in the can. So,
Yep.
yeah, so the Genesis Archive as a podcast is gonna be around for a while at least. That's
Oh yeah,
really cool.
yeah, because we've also got plans for two other like off season campaigns. One a superhero themed one, in a like new superhero setting that I created, and another in like another a high fantasy one set in like a kind of a like an indie game that I've played since I was a kid, that I actually got permission from one of the devs of the game to like have their game as a setting on the podcast.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. And then I have like up through season 7 planned, like the for the Unseen World. So not just the podcast, but the Unseen World specifically has a long shelf life.
Oh, gee, I I'm lucky if I have, like, 7 minutes into the session planned when I sit down at the table. It's
Yeah.
just
So I when I say planned, like it's bullet points. Like I don't have like the exact words that anyone like that people are gonna say and stuff. Like I haven't written out monologues for season 6 and 5 and whatnot.
right, right.
But like I have like all of the like main threats, the different major like mythological and folkloric characters we're going to meet, the different like aspects of the unseen world we're going to explore, the different ways the unseen world will change as things go on, because
Mhm,
as things go on long enough, the world will not stay the same. Um,
mhm.
like big things will happen that kind of change the landscape, kind of change the structure of the world in ways.
Well, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I've said that I tend to do my planning in bullet points, but I'm try to be ready to put them in a different gun depending on what the PCs do.
Yeah, like for example, I will have like in like if when I'm planning out a session, I'll have something like monster attacks PC. Like I'll have like and it but it will be like, so specifically I'll have like the monster of that episode attacks any of the PCs. And
Mhm.
in the session, which PC it attacks will be determined by like where the PCs have kind of situated themselves by that point in the episode, in the session. There's a lot of flexibility kind of between the bullet points. Like the monster will attack one of the PCs in that episode, but exactly which PC and in what manner will very much depend on them.
No, that's yeah, that in my head, that's a lot of what I try to do. Whether I quite that successful, I don't know. But, let me ask you this, because we're getting to where, it's about that time. Does the show have a website or anything where people go to look more up for it? I mean, I'm gonna put a link, to the podcast feed and whatever in the show notes, but if there's a website, I'd love to put that down too, anything like that. And, we'll link to the setting book you've released on Drive Through and so forth and your wealth rules as
Awesome.
well, but
No, there's not currently a website. That is something that we are like considering. We'd have to figure out exactly like what would be on the website and such. I've considered trying to make a wiki, but that's too much effort. Uh, but so we the making a website for the podcast is like something that is still kind of under consideration, but hasn't happened yet. If it does happen,
okay. No, that's fair. I was just throwing it out there because.
yeah.
I know you guys have a Discord server because that's how I ended up finding you directly. And if anyone wants that, I'm sure they can at least get a hold of me through the emails and contact information that's in our show notes, and or they can come to our Discord server and we'll get them hooked up one way or
Yeah,
another.
and we have the link to the Discord, like, on Anchor, and
Okay,
stuff. So that's there, and all of our social medias, have a link to, the Discord as well. We've got Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, YouTube.
yeah, you do release a lot of stuff on YouTube. I noticed that when I see you posting the episodes on like the D20 Network Discord.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to come talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me in.
Yeah, well, like I just liked it because as much as urban fantasy isn't particularly my thing, I like to see things where people have kind of taken the common version of something and went a different direction. And I think that's very much what you've done with just what I've experienced of the unseen world so far. And it sounds like you've gone considerably beyond what I've gotten the chance to get through.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely a lot more to the Unseen World than, what's in the first part of season 1.
So let me ask you this, with all this work that you've done, are there plans for like future add-ons to the setting book, either in the form of just revising the file or maybe other supplements to come out?
Yeah, so I do little tweaks to the main file every now and then when I like notice there's a typo or something. So that constantly doing little improvements on. But for when it comes to big add-ons, I do have several books planned. Specifically, I have one that is called Magic in the Unseen World, which is a deep dive into the various magic systems, and like kind of varieties of magic that exist in the world, and like how to integrate them into your own playing. And then the cities of the unseen world, which is one where I plan on kind of building out these other cities in the unseen world, cities like New Orleans, and showing like how they are in the unseen world, what factions have power in the cities, what sort of people live there, what kind of magical and supernatural threats exist, and kind of different like hooks for why a campaign might be set there, and then the denizens of the unseen world, which is kind of going to be just a big monster manual style book where it just is filled with a bunch of different creatures from folklore, and myth, and different people and different types of people that belong to the different factions of the unseen world. Factions like the Circle and Olympus Industries and the Order of Saint Lucifer. These different factions that kind of run the unseen world, and then and the just all of the different kind of humans, half humans, and monsters that populate the unseen world. I've got a decent bit of those in the core book, but I plan on making Denizens of the Unseen World just chock full of tons and tons of different stuff to play with.
Well, I mean, just again, in the little bit that I've gotten the time to listen to so far, you've got a whole lot of stuff, and I mean, you've literally got years upon years and cultures upon cultures of history to draw from. So,
Yeah, it's fun. I love it. Yeah, and then I do have a couple other books in the works, but they're even just their titles are spoilers.
oh,
Because they are kind of up books that are going to be about the updates to the world, like after certain points in the campaign.
okay, like certain, what do you want to say, key events or whatever.
They're kind of there's two main ones that I have planned where that each are kind of focused on how things have changed in the unseen world after these massive events occur.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I suppose, as is the way we do things, it sounds like well, actually, before I do all that, is there anything more you'd like to tell anyone about the Unseen World or the Genesis Archive podcast in general?
Just if you like folklore and mythology and vampires, werewolves, demons, fairies, gods, all of that, then come on over. We've got all of them and more. Um, and yeah, this whole world has really been a labor of love, and I like to think that shows in how it kind of comes out.
I would say, again, just based on my listening experience thus far, that yeah, it does show that you really do get into all this, and that you're not just taking, like I said before, the classic D&D mythology behind this creature, that creature, or just, the, for lack of a better way to say it, the Disney version of Robin Hood or King Arthur, and translating that to a game. You've actually gone back and done some research, and okay, this is what, this story came from. That's what you're using, not the watered down, et cetera versions of it. And yeah, I really think it's neat. So
Thanks.
you're welcome. But any case, with that, I think it's time to do a little thing that we call Game of the Week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
And I told you a little bit about what that is at the top of the show, or actually not at the top of the show, but before we started recording. Would you like to play Game of the Week with us?
Sure.
Well, in this case with me, because Steve had to dip out due to some issues. But
Gotcha.
in any case, would you like me to go first so you can kind of get a little bit of a feel for it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, my Game of the Week this week is, well, it's sort of a game, but it's actually an adventure or a campaign, kind of. It's listed as the EABA Regnum. What it is actually a kind of a campaign sort of thing, and it is written for a specific rule set, which is this EABA system. However, it is also written to be a system agnostic campaign or setting for you to play in. And I'm just going to read the first part of the drive-through listing for it because that explains it better than most of my rambling. It says, there was a world much like ours where brave men and women worked in the shadows fighting against an enemy the rest of the world either did not see or did not believe in. Over generations, their best and brightest fought and died to protect Earth and gave humanity a safe and prosperous future. This is not that world. In Irregnum, they lost and the bad guys won. Human civilization headed downhill fast, and the evil previous generations fought holds all the cards. You are the last resistance. While you are neither the best nor the brightest, you are what's left. And what this is really, it's not a story about the golden age of a civilization. it's not a post-apocalyptic setting. It's the apocalypse. Like it's when the poop hit the fan.
Nice.
And the idea of playing in that kind of a circumstance or a setting, that just seems really intriguing to me. And I mean, the PDF's $15.
Nice.
Actually, oh wow, it just came out last month too.
Oh,
I didn't
fun.
realize that. But the publisher is a company called BTRC, and like always, we'll link that in the show notes for people to find. Yeah, like I said, this looks like, and because it is designed to be kind of system agnostic, it actually says in the listing somewhere, I think, that essentially, as long as any RPG which handles modern combat or near future sci-fi can run an Regnum campaign. So,
Nice.
if you like Genesis or Savage Worlds or whatever your system of choice is, you can probably make this work. And like I said, I think it's just a real neat space to explore. And additionally, there is in the preview the whole first chapter of the document, so you can really get a feel for what it is before you put down any money, which I think is really neat.
Cool. That does sound really neat.
That would be my game of the week. I know it kind of hit you cold with this, but do you have anything?
So just like a interesting like game or system or
Well,
something.
yeah, something like that. I mean, like you mentioned that one that you're adapting the setting possibly for future Unseen World. I don't want you to spoil anything, but that type of thing, or something you played, a while back and just want to let people know is out there.
Yeah, so I am a fan of the Dresden Files RPG, largely because I'm a fan of the Dresden Files books. But it is a RPG. It's based off the Dresden Files books, which is a book series about a wizard who works as a private investigator in Chicago, and has a lot of like adventures. He has adventures with like a holy warrior who wields a sword made from like one of the nails from the cross, and fights vampires and werewolves and all sorts of stuff like that. And the Dresden Files RPG is based off of Fate. It's like uses the Fate dice and stuff, but is like altered from Fate to better fit the feel of the Dresden Files as a whole. And it's got some really fun stuff, especially if you want to play as like a supernatural type entity, where you can really get that supernatural vibe with being ridiculously strong or fast or whatever, or throwing magic around. And it's very fun. I have gotten absorbed into Genesis since Genesis came out, but I had a lot of fun with the Dresden Files RPG as well before then.
You know what? I mean, my thing is like, right? I think Genesis is amazing, and I haven't learned it as well as I'd like to yet. But sometimes you want to play in something, and if there's something already out, that's a lot of work you don't have to do to put it into your preferred system.
That is true. And yeah, the Dresden Files it is a great book series, and if you like that, then the Dresden Files RPG is a great way to kind of hop into that world.
Well, that's really cool. I like that. I think, like I said, the other Steve already has a copy of that. So
Cool. You have to let me know what you think about it after you test it out.
cool. All right. Well, I guess then with that, we're pretty much wrapped up. Anything more you'd like to say?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right. Well, then I would like to thank you for taking the time to come talk with us. And
Thanks for having me.
yeah, Steve said to tell you thanks as well. But I guess then with that, just really quickly, if anyone wants to contact us here at Me and Steve, all the links for the various social media, the Discord, Twitter, Facebook, and so on, it's in the show notes. And I think there's a little bit of it in the outro to the show. But with that, I'd just like to remind you all to be kind to one another and go play some RPGs.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Oh, Craig just didn't even bother to show up. He just,
Like last week.
yeah, he's just giving up.
Well, that's why we use G-Arc.
That was why we have that one blooper that is just us insulting Craig for 10 minutes.
Nice.
Actually, that one hasn't aired yet.
Yeah, it has. It was at the end of our most recent episode. It was at the end of the alignments episode when we were
Was it?
laughing. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, right. Yeah, it was. Okay, you're right. Okay. All right. We ready to rock and roll then?
Ready.
I'm ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Our D20 podcast is a network pod. Blah, 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 blah.